we're what do you call it? You see, I'm not a good host because I stumble over my stuff, and I'm not. I've had training in public speaking, but I don't like it. But and that's why I got Kano and Gary. But unfortunately, Kano and Gary ain't here today. But fortunately, I mean, I have to say we've got probably the most charismatic doctor, at least in the state of Florida. And that's a big deal because there's a lot of doctors in Florida. But we've got Doctor Rosado in the rotation with us today. So like I'm gonna start the show, kind of abruptly, but you are in the rotation. What's up, Joe? What's going on?
Hey, that was a great intro. I like that music.
Yeah, you like that music. Gary's got this whole thing. And like he comes in and he like bangs on the table and he's like, "You are in the rotation in Ybor City, where it all began." That's what I should do. I should start the show with a Gary impression.
Where it all began?
Yeah. So Ybor City is where it all began because Victor Licata beat up. He killed people with an axe, like 3 blocks away from where I'm sitting right now. And that's where the Tampa Bay Times first yellow journalism was. So Victor Licata was smoked a joint and killed his entire family. Was basically the press that came out in the Tampa Bay Times, and that like influenced Hearst and all that shit that happened.
Wow.
So that's what Gary's saying, and he's like, the building right over here. I've actually got this cool camera now that I can show you.
Yes, show the camera.
Uh, so over here, I got it. I got it. I got it. I got it. That right there, the bad monkey. You could probably even see. You kind of see there where it's like covered by the Coyote Ugly sign, but it says Lakata.
Uh-huh.
That's the Victor. That's the Lakata building. So who knows if somebody in the Lakata family that died that day owned the building across the street. Ybor City so spooky. Ah ha ha. So Dr. Rosado, we've got you specifically wanted to come on today. And you wanted to share this presentation with us, and we're really excited to have you share this presentation with us. But before we get into Delta 8 and how it works with the cannabinoid system and all that, you won like 4 awards at the Cannabis Action Awards.
Yes, I did.
There's 4 awards, right? Like and I don't have them all memorized, but I know one's like best doctor.
Yes,
Best
one was the first one that you guys announced was physician, best cannabis physician,
best cannabis physician.
followed by best cannabis educator,
Mm-hmm.
followed which I owed a lot to you and Florida Cannabis Coalition and United for Care because
Oh,
we
stop.
all when we all started back in 2014, you know, pushing and promoting and supporting John Morgan with the Amendment 2 and the decriminalization of medical cannabis, um, every other weekend you or somebody had something going on, and so that's how we all became friends, got acquainted, and really started promoting and advocating for the, for medical cannabis, which leads me to the final award I received, which was advocate, uh, best cannabis advocate, because we did do a lot of advocacy work, but it wasn't just me alone. And as I stated at the awards ceremony, I'm standing on the shoulders of everybody that came before me and came together, joined bands together in 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017 until today, because we're still dealing with stuff.
Yeah.
The fight's not over, and now the new thing, thanks to Mariah Barnhart, shout out to Mariah, who's been supporting and advocating strongly for home grow as well as, adult use, but specifically home grow.
A lot of people don't realize, but you could actually come here to Chillum and you can sign the WISE petition And that's because Chillum specifically supports growing at home in our system. So, shout out to Mariah and Wives. But you're right, dude. We've been doing this for quite some time. Um, you know,
Yeah,
uh,
and the cannabis industry, they say that cannabis business is like dog years. So
and
7 years, 1 year in business is like 7 years in any other business
we're
because the rules change, everything changes so quickly and so drastically. Initially, I don't know if you remember back in 2016 when I was recommending, you know, every other week we had a new rule or a new regulation that we could do or we could not do, or we had four diagnoses that we could only recommend for, and they could only be low THC. It could not be any cannabis unless and until we had the right to try act. But then you had to be terminally ill to receive any medical cannabis. It was the 90-day rule. Remember that nonsense when people had to wait 90 days to establish a doctor-patient relationship?
Yeah, and actually, it's actually kind of appropriate that you're talking about Delta 8 today because that was my latest fight where we were like I was up in Tallahassee basically every single weekend because a lot of politicians were trying to ban Delta 8 THC with these hemp bills that they were pushing.
Hmm.
And I forget the numbers for the fucking bills, but Senator Burden and Representative Williamson, those two guys were basically pushing the charge to regulate what they were calling the "stay in your lane" bill, because the hemp industry is alive and strong. I'm definitely, it's no secret that I own Chillum that sells a lot of Delta ATC and mushrooms, but uh, this is a big thing, and a lot of rumors were going around. I can't really, say that like I can justify these things, but these are rumors, and me, dude. Like I'm a pretty logical guy, but I'm not much of a conspiracy theorist. But I can theorize that these MMTCs were trying to push Delta 8 THC out of the market because we compete pretty hard with them, man. A lot of people come to my store because they can't afford medical marijuana in Florida, and Delta 8 THC offers them relief and offers them support. And I've been told, I don't know what your presentation is like. You know what I mean? Like I did look at it briefly, but I don't
So
even
you did not, you don't want to uh, limit what I'm going to express during today's talk. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
that. Well, yeah, that's
No
I
censorship. You're not
I
gonna
put
censor me.
I put Chillum right there, but I'm also deputy director of Normal, and Normal stands for educating people, and right or wrong, uh, you know, uh, you should tell the right stuff about Delta 8 THC, and I think you're about to do that. I don't think you're gonna either badmouth or really like be like, yeah, this shit's great. Uh,
Well, first and foremost, I am a physician. So, as a physician, there are going to be some slides that are going to be scientific, and there are going to be some slides that they're going to be talking about the science. I'm going to be looking at what the FDA says, what the DEA says. So, everyone at the end of this conversation is going to have an understanding of what the state of Florida says, what the DEA says, what the FDA says, and what science says. And so, from studies from Raphael Mechoulam that, granted, are going to be 50 years old, but there's not a whole lot of research going on in the Delta 8 space. When was the first endocannabinoid discovered? 1992. I was graduating from chiropractic school in 1992.
92.
Huh?
Wow.
Yeah, 1992 was when anandamide was named and discovered.
Wow, I didn't even realize that. 92 was the start. That was the start of the cannabis industry with Dennis Perone and whatnot. Um, one second, let me. All right, Well, we might as well just go ahead and get into
Let's
your
do it.
presentation with the phone in the background. So, do you mind sharing your screen with me, though, Doctor?
I I never mind
Yeah,
sharing
Joe.
anything with you.
I like calling you Doctor, but like we're friends. I can call you Joe.
Yeah, you can call me Joe.
Yeah,
Hang on.
I'll go ahead and just play this while you're looking.
Yeah.
That's Gary's old news clip. All right, you want me to just do my screen?
Hang on.
Oh. Uh.
Is it coming up? Did you see it?
It's frozen.
I'm frozen again.
Yeah. Uh-oh. Okay, guys, we're having technical difficulties. So, Joe, if you want to like just exit and come back in, and then I will just share from my side with the presentation. So, met Joe back in the day. Oh, he's already back. There you go. He's already back.
All right. So it's
Boom.
like when I share my screen, it's too much for the system. So if you can bring up the slides on your end, there you go.
All right, I can't exactly see what's going on,
I'll
but
yeah, when I need you to to hit forward, then I'll let you do that. Okay.
all right, cool.
All right. Super. All right. So I'm sure everyone that's on here today has at one time or another seen multiple signs as you're driving down any major highway across the United States, except for certain states, and we'll discuss which states shortly. Delta 8 THC sold here, THC sold here. Get your Delta 8 THC here. And so that's the main reason why Carlos and I had this conversation last weekend after the awards when I went to his shop and had some lunch and had a Cuban coffee with a nice cigar. And we were talking about all the different, things available in the market now versus, Delta 9, Delta 8, Delta 10, THCO, etc. And so I said, you know what? I've got a presentation on Delta 8 THC. Can I come on your show and present? And he's like, hell yeah, let's do it. So here it is. So on to the next slide. So for those of you that do not know who I am, this is a slide that represents me from the age of 16 to present. I'll be 61 in 3 weeks. Uh,
You're not that old.
I don't look that old, but some days I do feel that freaking old. But you can thank cannabis for me not looking this old, and great genetics from my mom and dad. On to the next slide. And in the cannabis space, this is what I've done from 2014 and 2016, being involved in the campaign in the state of Florida, as well as advocating and campaigning in countries south of the border, as well as Southeast Asia. And that photo shows Professor Lumir Hanoush, who's the gentleman that wrote the foreword to my book that was published in 2019. That is the cover of the book. And Professor Lemire Hanoush was the one that named the first endocannabinoid that was discovered in 1992, anandamide, which comes from the Sanskrit word which means what, Carlos?
Bliss.
Exactly,
Yeah.
ananda, which means bliss. Yeah. So Professor Lemire Hanoush was the gentleman that named it after Professor Meshulam discovered it. So, and it was in 1992. 1992 was when I graduated with my first doctorate degree as a chiropractor, and then 5 years later, I went back to medical school. So there you have it. All right. So today's agenda. This is what we're going to be discussing today, pretty much in this order. First and foremost, what the hell is Delta 8? Everybody talks about Delta 8, Delta 8, Delta 8. What is it? What is it really? What's the difference between Delta 9 and Delta 8 THC? What is bioavailability? So we're going to get scientific on you. What is bioavailability? Bioavailability, I will define when we get to that slide. How does Delta 8 THC work in the endocannabinoid system? Does it even work in the endocannabinoid system? Most importantly, is it legal? Carlos has been fighting the good fight for legality, and so we will be addressing that. I'm sure Carlos will have a lot of information and input in that section. What's delta 8 THC used for medically? So, as a physician, we'll be talking about delta 8 THC's uses for medical reasons. Clinical trials involving delta 8. Are there really clinical trials testing and checking for delta 8 THC? We'll see. And of course, with the good, we got to talk about the bad or not so bad. We have to discuss risks and adverse effects of delta 8 THC. And last but not least, will you pee dirty? I, together with being a medical doctor, I'm also a medical review officer. My role is to inform an individual that has had a urine drug screen whether they peed dirty or did not. And so we're going to talk about whether delta 8 THC causes you to pee dirty. So, on to the next slide. So, what is delta 8? Proceed. Delta 8 THC is a cannabinoid derived from hemp and cannabis plants. It is naturally derived, as contrary to popular belief. It is naturally derived. Delta 8 THC does occur in nature and is made by converting other naturally occurring compounds such as CBD. However, it can be made synthetically. How is it made synthetically? Delta 8 THC is made synthetically by dumping highly refined CBD isolate into a low grade hydrochloric acid and toluene. Now, for those of you that are not biochemists, what is toluene? You know what toluene is, Carlos?
I have no idea, to be honest with you.
So toluene is a colorless liquid with a sweet, pungent odor. Exposure to toluene can cause eye and nose irritations, tiredness, confusion, euphoria, dizziness, headache, dilated pupils, tears, anxiety, muscle fatigue, insomnia, nerve damage, inflammation of the skin, and liver and kidney damage.
Right.
Now, what the hell is toluene used for? Toluene is used for, has been utilized in paints, lacquers, thinners, even explosives, TNT.
TNT,
TNT.
like dynamite.
Dynamite. There you go. You know what TNT is. You watched Bugs Bunny.
The Wile E. Coyote, man, the Acme. So toluene is a big supporter of the Acme Dynamite Factory.
There you go. Toluene is
Get it?
Wile E. Coyote's best friend.
I get it. All right.
So, so those are the natural and unnatural ways of doing. Now, what's the difference between the two? For those of you that are biochemical and organic chemistry geeks, the difference between delta 8 and delta 9 THC is that the double bond is shifted from the ninth carbon to the eighth carbon. By having that shift from the ninth carbon to the eighth carbon, it makes delta 8 20 to 30% less intense, less potent than delta 9. Many of us in the industry have referred to delta 8 as THC light because it gives you about a 20 to 30% euphoria as compared to delta 9. What's been your experience, Carlos?
Okay, so this is actually where um this is my argument for the safety of Delta 8 THC.
Go ahead.
I have told customer after customer, basically like this is a chemical makeup, right? H2O is water, whether it's made in a laboratory or if it's made in a cloud, right? That's exactly what I say. And I say water is water, right? So delta 8 THC is delta 8 THC as long as the process is done properly. Because I'll go back, I have control of the slides. Toluene sounds scary as shit, and if regardless of how scary toluene is, right? Hydrochloric acid, you know that shit ain't good. So
But
like
it's found in your stomach naturally.
this slide though is scary as shit. But over here, this is where I can like logically find that like delta 8 THC is like safe, that it's like, as a matter of fact, it's better for people who suffer from things like anxiety because it's like you said, like delta 9 THC light. So like there's actually a use for it and even though that there's some like dangerous chemicals in deriving delta 8 THC, right? It doesn't matter as long as it's sourced from like a good company, right? That does things properly. Whatever that process is of extracting the delta 8 THC from the toluene.
Exactly.
um
And as you're saying, it has a more gradual and a more satisfying effect on the consumer. So I'm sure that many of your consumers that have utilized the Delta 8 will come in and tell you it's an easier, lighter high, and it doesn't hit you as aggressively. And for those people that do suffer from anxiety or become paranoid when they use cannabis, using Delta 8 doesn't make them that anxious, doesn't make them that paranoid. Wouldn't you agree?
yeah, yeah. And I mean, to be you saw the dab break here. We do delta 8 dabs all day off of 7th Avenue, here in Ybor City. So like it's something
Plug,
that
plug, plug, plug. Go for it.
we've that's the thing though, is like we've never seen an issue. Like we've never seen somebody that like, couldn't handle their shit, or like couldn't get home, or you know what I mean? So like it's not a dangerous cannabinoid. But anyways, I'll stop plugging my store and I'll switch the slide.
Thank you. So now let's talk about the Delta 8 and the endocannabinoid system. As you can see, you have the presynapse and presynaptic bulb, postsynaptic bulb. The space in between is the synapse. These are two nerves, two neurons coming together, joining. And so you have one at before, one after. And so the way endocannabinoids are produced in the body is you get some type of an action potential, whether it's pain, pleasure, an orgasm, exercise, etc. Any one of those things will cause an action potential, will stimulate the nerves, and it will cause the release and production of endocannabinoids, anandamide 2-AG being the two most commonly found endocannabinoids. And that is, as for those of us that remember Reader's Digest, it is the Reader's Digest version. So, does Delta 8 work on the endocannabinoid system? The answer is yes. It works exactly like Delta 9 THC uh, in the endocannabinoid system, meaning that it works on the CB1 receptor. So Delta 8 THC, similar to Delta 9 THC, works on the CB1 receptor. And my source for that, and for those of you that are wondering what the hell is at the bottom of each slide, those are my references. That's where I got the information from. So if you have any questions as to what it is, where it is that I got this information, it's at the bottom of each slide. Every one of my slides is referenced because it's not me talking stuff, it's there. But on this slide, you'll see that this definition came from the National Can back up one, please, Carlos. This information came from the National Cancer Institute. So the National Cancer Institute recognizes that delta 8 THC is medicine and that it does indeed work on the endocannabinoid system and does work on the CB1 receptor. Okay, Carlos, on to the next. Sorry. Now, bioavailability. What is bioavailability? Go ahead, Carlos. So bioavailability is refers to how a substance and at what rate substances are absorbed in our bodies. Okay, so that's all bioavailability means. It refers to how much and at what rate something is absorbed by the bloodstream into our body so that it causes an effect. So, very similar to modes of administration that are available, it works exactly the same way. So, just like with inhalation, and we'll do a quick recap of how things are absorbed in our bodies. When you inhale cannabis, whether it's Delta 9, Delta 8, CBD, CBG, whatever you're inhaling, you're going to get the effect within 3 to 10 minutes. However, it's only going to last within 2 to 4 hours, depending on how you metabolize. Okay. Next, you get what is called sublingual, where you put a tincture under your tongue. This tincture under your tongue will take anywhere between 30 to 90 minutes to start working. However, it can last anywhere between 4 and 6 hours. Followed then by oral ingestion, whether you're eating a gummy or a cookie or a brownie or a capsule, a gel cap. When you ingest it orally and you swallow it, it can take up to 2 hours for you to feel the effect, but it can last anywhere between 6 and 12 hours depending on how you metabolize. So, for that reason, this is why people get into trouble when they eat gummies and edibles, because they'll take an edible and, you know, 20, 30, 45, 60 minutes later, they're like, no, this shit doesn't work. This is crap. Let me take another one. And now they double down on the edible, and now they're couch locked, drooling on themselves, looking at their crotches, which is why our mantra has always been start low, go slow. Now, there are other modes of administration that are not typically discussed. Topical, where you use it on the skin. You have cannabinoid receptors on the skin. However, the problem with topical is that the rate limiting step, what prevents the cannabis from entering the bloodstream, is the fact that underneath the skin you have a layer called the dermis, which is very um, liquidy. It's filled with water. It's aqueous, meaning it has water in it. And cannabis is lipophilic hydrophobic, loves fat, hates water, which is why I always encourage my patients that when they take a gummy or an edible, to take something fatty with it, whether it's peanut butter, cashew butter, almond butter, ice cream, not to be cliche, but chocolate, a brownie, ice cream. Take something fatty with it because it'll help with the absorption in your body. You don't want to take it with something that's water based, like coffee or tea or your regular water, unless it has been processed with the nanotechnology, which I believe you have in your shop, Carlos, right?
Mhm.
Don't nod yes, say yes.
The I was eating a cookie, so I pushed the mic. Um, the so I have a question, right? Is there a difference in bioavailability between vaping and smoking?
No, there's no bioavailability difference between vaping and smoking because they're both considered inhalation. So
Uh-huh.
whether you're inhaling it in a nasal spray, as one of the products from one of our dispensaries in the state of Florida, one of the medical marijuana treatment centers, um, I'll go ahead and name them because we're not getting any money, and this is a disclaimer: we're not getting any money from Trulieve. But Trulieve has a product called Canatol, which I strongly recommend and encourage a lot of my special needs moms and dads to purchase for their children that have autism or have seizures or have ADD, ADHD, and when they're having a meltdown or on the verge of having a seizure, they can squirt the cannabis directly into the nose. That falls under inhalation.
Hmm.
So, so that, same as vaping, same as dry vaping, which is what I primarily do. On occasion, I will combust, I will light up. However, I use the a riser solo 2. Again, no plug, it's just what I use, my personal preference, primarily because the reason I choose the Arizer Solo over the PAX 3 is because the Arizer Solo's temperature range is greater than that of PAX 3. And each phytocannabinoid has a different vaporization point. Each phytocannabinoid, CBG, THC, CBD, CBN, each one has a different point where it vaporizes. So by me being able to control the temperature, I'm able then to focus on which phytocannabinoid I want to ingest at that time. So it gives me more latitude to use each one of the phytocannabinoids in the plant. And I take advantage of using more of the THCA and CBDA as opposed to the active forms of CBD THC. So, as far as bioavailability goes, inhalation is inhalation, whether you're putting it in your nose through a nasal spray or inhaling it with a vape pen or doing a dry vape as I do or combusting as the traditional cannabis user uses it. Two
Smoking.
other modes of administration are suppositories and the Picote method. The Picote method I discussed a few years back at the FMCCE, which in fact is going on this weekend here in Orlando at the Rosen Center. Plug to Gene, who does an amazing job with his event. every year. Anyway, the Pakoti method is that borrowed from the Ayurvedic medicine people, where they apply medication in their belly buttons. So the tincture that you put in your under your tongue, or the oils that you put on your skin, you can put those oils in your belly button, and it'll be absorbed through the belly button into the circulation.
Sometimes I forget to clean my belly button and it smells bad.
Well, now you need to remember to clean your belly button. So now you have another mode of administration to put your cannabis in. Anyway, now let's talk about the legality. This slide pretty much, in fact, it's not even a month old. Tomorrow will be 1 month that this information came out. So you have the three different colors here. For those of you that are colorblind, I'm sorry. You have blue, you have red, and you have like a light green color. Light green color means that there is no official ban on Delta 8. Blue means that it's regulated, and 8 means that it is, red means that it is completely banned. Okay. And so, for those of you that failed geography and U.S. history, on to the next slide, Carlos. One more slide. There you go. These are the states where Delta 8 is 100% banned. It is banned in Alaska, banned in Colorado, banned in Delaware, banned in Idaho, banned in Iowa, banned in Minnesota, banned in Missouri, banned in Tennessee, I'm sorry, New York, banned in Rhode Island, banned in South Carolina and Vermont. And now Tennessee, just this week, passed a law about the use of Delta 8 THC in Tennessee. So these are the states where you cannot purchase, have, utilize, carry any Delta 8. It is 100% banned.
So
On,
let
go
me
ahead.
ask you a question.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I'm gonna interrupt for most of your presentation.
that's okay. It's a conversation. It's you and me.
Well, yeah, we're in the rotation. You know what I mean? Like we're technically smoking a joint right now. That's how this whole podcast started. But um, the how many of these states are legal marijuana states?
Alaska's a legal marijuana state. Colorado's a legal marijuana state. Idaho, Iowa are not. Minnesota is illegal. Missouri is illegal. New York is illegal. South Carolina is not. Vermont is not, and Rhode Island is not. So five.
So okay, so it's not all of them.
No.
All right. That's one thing that we were saying in Tallahassee.
And
That
by legal, we're discussing adult use.
yeah, yeah.
For those of you that are not familiar with the vernacular, that are not in the industry like Carlos and I, um, legality, we're referring to adult use. So New York has adult use, Minnesota has adult use, Colorado obviously has adult use, um, Missouri has adult use. So
What about Delaware?
I I don't seem to recall Delaware being an adult use state.
All right.
Maybe someone from Delaware can enlighten us or can bring us some information. Now, I'll go back 2 slides, please. There you go. Perfect. So for the most part, Delta 8 THC is legal. Why? Because it falls under, and this is important that we mention, it falls under the Farm Bill. The Farm Bill 2018 signed into law by Donald Joint Trump. And yes, his middle name is Joint. It's a J. And so Donald J. Trump, a J is a joint. So Donald Joint Trump signed into law in in December of 2018 the Farm Bill. And what that Farm Bill reads and states is that anything that comes and is found in the hemp plant is legal as long as the THC component is less than or equal to 0.3% in the United States. If you go to Europe, the amount of delta 9 THC or THC that's permitted is 0.2%. And if you go south of the border to Mexico, Central America, South America, i.e. Colombia, it's permitted to have up to 1% THC in the over the counter component of cannabis. So if it is being sold over the counter and it comes from the hemp plant, it must be 0.3% THC or less. That's defined by the government. That's not a botanical definition. So if any botanists are out there that want to have an argument with me, this is not botany. This is government. This is a federal law that was signed into law in December of 2018. Because of that law, then delta 8 THC, because it naturally occurs in the hemp plant, is legal. But it makes it gray because, again, as we saw in one of the first slides, it can be found naturally, but it can also be made synthetically. Carlos, I see you grabbing the microphone. What is it you want to add?
No, I mean it's incredible that you know I just all I want to add is I want to say that I'd rather doctors and honestly doctors and patients equally have the ability to define things rather than politicians. But legal definitions are what is important, and yeah, it's very true. The definition of hemp is not the same where everywhere you go, and then there's a whole plant that's kind of different, and could help out agriculture here in Florida, but nobody seems to grow it. But
Now, now the important thing to remember is delta 8 THC or delta 8 is not been defined as federal. There's no federal controlled substance. Okay.
uh,
Now, it is not a controlled substance. It has not been defined as a controlled substance in the United States. Now, what's the law here in Florida? Carlos could speak to this way better than me, but it's pretty much the same across the board for all of the other states where it is not banned or regulated. And as long as it follows federal law, it is legal in the state of Florida. However, as Carlos could definitely attest to, and he already mentioned earlier, there are legislators out there and a few physicians, I may add, um, none that are practicing and seeing medical cannabis patients, more that sit in ivory towers, glass houses in academic institutions that want to squash the Delta 8 movement and or any hemp movement. And they are of the opinion that it needs to be banned in the state of Florida. And Carlos, shed some light as to where that fight is right now, today, June 4th, 2023.
I mean, there was a point in time where I was scared that most of my, you know, a big part of my income was going to be gone. And there was, thousands of business owners in the state that ended up lobbying the legislator. And I can't really say that there was like some like concentrated movement or something like that. There was a lot of different people that just went after these legislators and got them to change the bill. So like honestly, to go back here, uh I would put Florida as blue right now, because we are 21 and up. That's essentially, and there's certain things that they kind of snuck in there that was like we have to have certain type of packaging or whatever, but we're essentially regulated. I In my opinion, like I don't know what what would qualify as regulated for this slide.
Well,
um
what's interesting is to get medical cannabis in the state without a caregiver is 18. So
uh
if you're 18 years of age or older, you can get a medical cannabis card and you don't need your parents or a parent or a caregiver to purchase your medication for you.
mhm.
And at the age of 18, you are eligible to get flower. Whereas prior to the age of 18, so 17 and lower, you're not allowed to get any flower, but yet you can purchase dab, wax, and rosin
Mhm.
because
you,
all those all fall under inhalation.
you can get Delta 9 edibles. One of my favorite products, I eat one a day, one of these Rice Krispie treats. And it is a lot of THC in it. It's 80 milligrams in each in each Rice Krispie treat. but it's it definitely um competes with medical marijuana in the state. Um, and it's just too far of you. You know me, Joe. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm a very logical guy, sometimes too logical. Let's even go there. But it just seems like there's medical marijuana treatment centers, specifically ones that operate in separate states, that would like to see THC derived from hemp banned. Um, and they've sponsored legislation in other states and have been open about sponsoring that legislation. And I maybe you could talk about or maybe you don't even want to talk about it, but some doctors are definitely paid by these people in some way or another. So it seems whenever physicians and politicians are there's some way to paint a payment trail, like, you know what I mean.
Well, like they always said, follow the money.
There you go.
So on to the next slide.
Hey,
So
Greg, I still love Greg, even though.
so we love Greg. I've on multiple occasions have said that he's my favorite geek because he is brilliant. He knows
Great geek.
far more. He knows far more about the plant than I will ever know, and he's dedicated pretty much his adult life to the study and investigation and research of the plant.
Yeah.
And his position as a scientist, not as a physician, not as a treating physician, not as a politician, as a scientist, pure scientific point of view, his point of view is that delta 8 THC is no better and no different than K2 and spice. He is of the opinion that it is synthetic, that it is not naturally occurring, that the natural occurrence that is found in the plant is minuscule, it's nominal, it's not enough to be branded or sold. And so for that, and that is respected. I respect him because again, he's been involved in this movement far longer than the legality in the state of Florida has existed. And he is well known, well respected, and well published. He's written multiple research articles, etc., and books, and was a college professor. So kudos and shout out to Greg Gerdeman. But that's his scientific position. Now, on the flip side of that, Mr. Kite, who defended the Delta 8 movement and the Farm Bill of 2018 in the United States, he's an attorney in North Carolina, advocates and supports the legality of Delta 8. And he sticks to the definition, and I will read it, where he says Delta 8 can be extracted from hemp. Delta 8 is extracted from hemp. It's legal. That's it. Because it comes from the hemp plant, it's legal. And there's a cannabis school here in Orlando that I went to visit, and one of the individuals there is a patient of mine, and he made a statement which kind of like shocked me when he made it, but I'm like, well, damn, that's about right. He said if cocaine were to come from the hemp plant, it would be legal because it comes from the hemp plant. And anything that comes from the hemp plant is legal. Have you ever heard that statement, Carlos?
Nah.
But I mean, it's an extreme example, but it does make sense because if it comes from the hemp plant, it falls under the Farm Bill 2018, which states that anything that is found in the hemp plant and sold is legal because it falls under that umbrella of the Farm Bill of 2018.
There were definitely, like, it was definitely a confused this earlier this year when we were, fighting these different hemp bills. It was a confusing time because there were even certain, we talked about politicians and doctors, but there are certain activists that have been advocating for illegal cannabinoids for a very, very long time. And that's how I see Delta 8 and hemp. is the opportunity to have a legal cannabinoid. Maybe I would like to see cannabis itself legalized. But right now, this is what we got. And it seems kind of awkward for activists to be advocating against something beneficial. You know what I mean?
Well,
I don't know.
different strokes for different folks. So, what does the DEA say? Because the Drug Enforcement Agency, I have a DEA license. My DEA license allows me to write prescriptions that are Schedule 2 to Schedule 5. So, because of that DEA license, that gives me permission to write prescriptions for Adderall, Vyvanse, Concerta, Tramadol, Marinol, Dronabinol, synthetic THC, um, clonazepam, diazepam, alprazolam, etc., etc. So DEA officials, huh?
Ketamine.
Ketamine, yes, that's a Schedule 3.
Uh,
Very good. In our one of our future shows, we will talk about ketamine like we did last weekend. Anyway, the DEA officials have indicated that Delta 8 THC products are not controlled substances as long as they are extracted from the natural plant and not synthesized. So again, there's the gray area. It's legal, it's not controlled as long as it comes from the plant. The minute it is synthesized, it is considered illegal. The Federal Appeals Court ruled last year, not even a year ago, that Delta 8 is not controlled because the Controlled Substances Act only explicitly speaks to the natural Delta 9 THC and because federal statute defines hemp as any part of the cannabis plant, including all derivatives, extracts, and cannabinoids that contain less than 0.3% delta 9 THC by weight. So again, there is no federal law that criminalizes delta 8 THC because it falls under the Farm Bill of 2018. Hence the gray area. So is it or isn't it? That's for you to decide individually. I've shown you the data. I've shown you what the DEA says. I've shown you what the federal courts have said. Now it's an individual decision. Now, let me be doctor. So I'm going to put my doctor hat on and take my advocate and political hat off. So, what are the effects of Delta 8 and the benefits? As you can see in this comparative slide, Delta 8 and Delta 9 THC have pretty much the same side effects and the same effects overall.
really? Wow. That is like copy and paste, huh?
It's like yeah, literally, it's almost identical. Delta 8, Delta 9 THC effects are almost identical. Of course, there's a lack of research and evidence when it comes to Delta 8's impact on the overall health. However, users, many of my patients have reported that it calms their nausea, it boosts their appetite, it eases their pain, it boosts their mental health, and prevents vomiting during cancer treatments. Very similar to Delta 9. And get ready because for the next few slides, I've got clinical studies that prove and support every one of these claims. Anti-neoplastic activity. Anti means against, neoplastic means formation of tumor, activity means actions. Okay, so does Delta 8 have an action or activity against cancer? According to this study, it does. They treated individuals, not individuals, they treated mice that had lung tumors. The dosages ranged from 50 to 400 milligrams per kilogram, and they discovered that individuals that received, or the individual mice that received 50 milligrams versus 200 versus 400 milligrams per kilogram had an increased lifespan by 23, 25, and 27%.
Wow.
So it
That's
shows,
significant,
this
right?
study shows, and this study was done back in 1975. So granted, 50 years ago, give or take, um, not much research has been done with this. I went on PubMed and found less than 200 research papers published research papers on Delta 8, and many of them were comparing Delta 8 to Delta 9. There was no study specific, except for one, which I will be discussing here shortly. There was only one study where it compares Delta 8 to an anti nausea medicine, but
Huh.
all the others compare Delta 8 to Delta 9.
And CBN as well, huh?
Yeah, not even. So moving on to the next slide. Antiemetic. Anti means against, emesis means vomiting. So antiemetic in a pediatric oncology case. These were children that were receiving chemotherapy. And prior to receiving chemo and then after having received chemo, they were given Delta 8 and they discovered that it controlled their nausea. And this study was done in 1995, and look who the primary researcher was, Raphael Mechoulam.
Sure, man. Huh.
So moving on, increasing appetite, very similar to Delta 9. It also causes a stimulation of the appetite in individuals. So very similar to Delta 9. So pretty much everything that Delta 9 does, Delta 8 does.
Hmm.
Maybe a little bit better because as we discussed earlier, it's not as aggressive, it's not as traumatic to the novice, to the neophyte user.
Yeah, you could start off with Delta 8 and work your way up to Delta 9. I get it.
Start low, go slow. Okay, pain and anti-inflammatory effects. The number one reason for patients to seek for medical cannabis in the state of Florida, hands down, bar none, is pain. Because many people are sick and tired of being on narcotics, on opiates,
Yeah.
and all of the adverse effects of those medications. And so they're looking for something natural. And for that reason, they have chosen to go the cannabis route. And so, that being said, in 2018, a study was published, Cannabis and Cannabinoid Research, and it showed that Delta 8 THC effectively reduces pain and inflammation in corneal injuries in mice. This was specifically studied for them. And again, why? Because of Delta 8's ability to work on the CB1 receptor, which is primarily found in the brain and spinal cord. CB1 receptors are found everywhere else, but it's primarily found in the brain and spinal cord, which are where the pain centers are located, specifically substance P, for those of you that want to know a little bit more. Okay, next slide. Now, this is the one study that I found that compares Delta 8 to ondansetron. Ondansetron, for those of you that are not physicians, is Zofran. Zofran is an anti-nausea, anti-vomiting medication. And this study was being conducted in Israel. And the goal was to have 108 patients enrolled in the study, dividing them into four groups, 27 people in each group, using 300 micrograms and 600 micrograms of Delta 8 THC, and it was going to be double blinded. They were going to have some that were getting Zofran, some that were going to be getting the Delta 8, and some that were going to be getting one or the other. So it was going to be completely double blinded. Perfect. Unfortunately, only 6 people enrolled in the study.
Yeah.
So the study never ever materialized. Now, how dangerous is Delta 8? This is coming from the FDA. FDA stands for Food and Drug Administration. So, moving on, they have 5 things that one must know about Delta 8 THC. The number one thing that the FDA wants everyone to know is that what?
They do not approve.
It has not been evaluated or approved by the FDA for safe use and may be marketed in ways that put the public health at risk. Now, this next point I laugh at, and you'll see why as I go through it. So according to the FDA, 104 reports of adverse events in patients who consumed Delta 8 THC products occurred between December 1st, 2020 to February 28th, 2022. So, in about 2 years span of time, 104 reports were made. Okay.
Mhm.
Of these 104 adverse reports, okay, 104, I'll say the number again, 104 adverse results in 2 years, 77% or 77 were adults, 8 were children, and they were less than the age of 18, and 15% had did not report an age. 55% required intervention, i.e., going to the EMS, contacting 911, or going to the emergency department. 66% described the events after ingestion of Delta 8, consuming food products, i.e., brownies, gummies, edibles, etc. Now, in
That
2 years, there were 104 reports. How many adverse effects or reports are reported on a yearly basis of ibuprofen, of acetaminophen?
I have no idea.
A hell of a lot more than 104.
Wow. I am interested in the 8% involving pediatric patients less than 18 years of age because everything in Tallahassee was about kids being able to get a hold of Delta 8 THC. So,
Well, as what's happened everywhere, irresponsible parents, irresponsible caretakers.
well,
They use their medicine, they use their products, they leave it in the coffee table, they leave it where a child can access it.
I'm not a mathematician, but 8% of 104 adverse event reports, right? For 2 years, that's about 8 reports. That's not
Yeah, that's 8 reports.
that's maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit more, maybe not, maybe not. But
No, it'll be less because if it
last,
were 8% of 100 is 8. So 8% of 104 would be between 6 and 7
all right. So
over 2 years.
7 to be fair. That's crazy that we went through that for 7 reports.
There you go.
It was all about the kids, and like it just seems to be more of a political ploy because that it just comes up, the kids come up a lot in Tallahassee now, you know what I mean?
Of
Like
course, yeah, because it's scare tactic. It's fear mongering, and they sell fear because that's how laws are created. Laws are created based on fear. Religion is created based on fear. Religion is man-made. It's made by men to control minds.
let's not get too controversial, doctor. You don't want to go down this road, believe me.
Well, you're an atheist and I'm an agnostic, so there you go. Okay, the last 3 points that the FDA wants everyone to know. Number 3, Delta 8 THC has psychoactive and intoxicating effects. No shit, Sherlock.
Yeah.
Number 4, Delta 8 THC products often involve the use of potentially harmful chemicals to create the concentrations of Delta 8 THC claimed in the marketplace. We discussed that from the beginning. We talked about toluene and where toluene comes from and what toluene is used for and where it's found. So, yeah, we've discussed it. And number 5, oh no, one more. Delta 8 THC products should be kept out of reach of children and pets, which we established. Any responsible human being knows that you want to keep your medicine, whether it's Delta 8 THC, Delta 9 THC, CBN, CBD, anything, your acetaminophen, your ibuprofen, your sleeping medication, your anti anxiety medication, your pain medications, you want to keep them all out of reach of children and pets. So, will Delta 8 THC make you pee dirty? The short answer, yes. Why? Because when we do a urine drug screen, we are testing for THC. Whether it's Delta 9 or Delta 8, we are testing for THC. And if there's any THC in your system, It will show up. So, what is the range? Okay, if you are an occasional user, you participate occasionally, and this goes for Delta 9 as well as Delta 8, it's going to stay in your system 2 to 5 days. If you're a regular user, um, on a daily basis, 1 to 2 times a day, it's going to be in your system up to 15 days. If you are Snoop Dogg, or as my buddy Barry Gordon would call it, a doobie 4, where it's an extremely experienced user. So Willie Nelson, Cheech, Chong, Snoop.
Me.
I didn't want to throw you under the bus, my friend. It will stay in your system far longer than 15 days. It'll be in your system as much as 30 days. I've had patients where it has been in their system for up to 45 days.
I gotta tell you, Dr. Rosado, I'm a little soggy around the midsection here. Probably 45 days for me.
Yeah, 45 days. And why is that? Because you just hit the nail on the head. When you ingest cannabis, cannabis is stored in the fat cells. So the more fat cells you have, the more it is stored in those cells. And then it is slowly released from these fat cells into the bloodstream and then is metabolized. But when you ingest cannabis, it goes to the cannabinoid receptors, but then it is stored in fat cells. So those of us that have less fat in our bodies tend to have the cannabis less in our systems than those of us that have more fat in our bodies. So the idea, which I get this call a lot from friends, colleagues, and patients, Doc, I'm going to have a urine drug screen, and if I drink a lot of water, will it help? No, no fucking way is drinking water going to help reduce the amount of THC in your system. Because as I mentioned earlier, cannabis is lipophilic hydrophobic, loves fat, lipophilic, loves fat, hydrophobic, has a phobia for water, hates water. So, likes fat, does not like water. So, loves Carlos, hates me.
But that's the idea of, I mean, I understand how people get confused though, because a lot of these detox programs on the market, like they essentially make it so that you're just pissing out the water. Like, I mean, that's a crude way of saying how these things work.
Yeah.
You basically, like, you overhydrate yourself and you drink I think the medical term is a diuretic.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And it just makes it so that, like, there's no trace of your fat cells in your urine. So I think that's where people get confused with the water. But yeah.
So no, drinking water is not going to help it. This slide is a link to a promotion that one of our local MMTCs, medical marijuana treatment centers, used to have available, and it's still available online. However, they no longer sell Delta 8 THC in the MMTC. But back in the day, back when everything was starting and the movement was starting, about up to about 2 years ago, you would say, right? They were selling Delta 8 THC at one of the MMTCs.
Dare I click on this?
Go ahead.
Can you see?
We're not regulated.
Like, oh, I'm so nauseous. The man. Available at Chillable. There's so many of them.
So, disclaimer, no, Trulieve did not pay me or Carlos to have that slide in my slide deck. Leave that slide up, Carlos. Yeah, that's my contact information. One forward. There you go. So no, Trulieve did not pay for me to have that, but I want to show everyone that it was sold at a medical marijuana treatment center. That's the take-home message. That it was safe enough to be sold at a medical marijuana treatment center, but then for whatever reason, and I don't know what reason, maybe someone from Trulieve can shed some light as to why they chose to take Delta 8 off the market, uh, off of their shelves, but it was sold at an MMTC. And there you have it, Carlos. That's our presentation for today. And that last slide, go ahead back to the last slide.
Oh.
Uh, it has my contact information. Just zoom through everything and go to number 33. There you go. That is my contact information. So if anyone wants to get a hold of me in any way, shape, or form, there's my website, there's my personal email address, the phone that you can reach me. You can reach me through WhatsApp, and then all of my URLs for LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. So if anyone wants to ask a question, is there a capability to ask a question on this platform, Carlos? Does someone
Yes.
write?
People can like post into chats and whatnot. Um,
Has anyone chatted into the
they're
Facebook Live?
they're more than welcome to. We're broadcasted on Facebook, on YouTube. We got a couple of people watching, so if anybody has a question, let us know. I'll put it up on the screen. But that's interesting that Trulieve used to sell Delta 8, and yeah, that is the rumor. That is the rumor that Trulieve was going after. There's no way to prove it though. I will say that it's essentially like ganja leaks gossip. You know, it went pretty far. This whole like conspiracy about the Trulieve being against the hemp industry went pretty far. Like it even went to like people calling Wiz Khalifa a sellout on TikTok, calling him Mids Khalifa because he's associated with a program that's like getting rid of hemp and whatnot. And honestly, doesn't sell a particularly good product. But dare I say that? I said it.
Well, there you have it. So, do you have any questions before we sign off, Mr.
I
Carlos?
I appreciate you, Doctor Rosado. You've always been a good friend and advocate for the plant. You are out there. You're still taking patients and still treating people with pretty serious disorders. And I just want to thank you for not just for coming on today, but being deserving of those 4 awards that you got at the Cannabis Action Awards. Because you are a good guy. You do a lot of things that are for your patients, and I appreciate you, sir. You're a good friend.
Well, you too are a good friend and an amazing human being and a phenomenal advocate for the plant. And so, and now I will plug you. So if anyone is in the Tampa area or the Ybor City area and soon in the St. Petersburg area, look up Chillum to get all of your over the counter legal medical cannabis products without a medical cannabis card.
Wonderful. And we got mushrooms too, everybody.
And soon we'll be talking about psychedelics and ketamine, which is really the area that I'm now delving and looking into. I've been managing and treating a few patients with ketamine that have had traumatic brain injuries, post traumatic stress disorder, treatment resistant depression, and the results have been absolutely amazing.
And this is just a reminder as well that you can join Suncoast Normal at suncoastnormal.org. It's NORML. And yeah, that's if you want to support the cannabis movement and support this podcast and everything that we do. The best way is really to just sign up for a membership, come to the events that we throw, and share this podcast. Everybody, just share it right now, all you people out there. And I appreciate y'all. Dr. Rosado, anything you want to tell our fans out there, or, anything you want to say before we go?
I'll end this like I end every interview. Cannabis is medicine.